Okay, so the last set of absolute monarchs we need to look at are the ones in England. Now, you should have a little bit of familiarity with them since we did talk about King Henry VIII, and he is an absolute monarch who comes into control. Okay, but really the focus we're going to have is what's going to be the problems with these absolute monarchs and what's going to happen in England, more specifically, what's going to happen with the English Civil War that's really going to divide England. And again, if you think about it, it's driven by monarchs in control versus parliamentary democracy, which had been in England previously through the Magna Carta, and also Catholics and Protestants, which again, religion plays a big factor. So let's look at the English Civil War. Okay, and again, Civil War is a conflict within the country between the same people. American Civil War, North versus South. In this case, it's not going to be a really a geographical decision or of North versus South. It's going to be more along the lines of belief in the king versus belief in the parliament, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. Okay, so you have two groups. You have people that are called Cavaliers, and these Cavaliers are going to support King Charles I, King Charles Cavaliers. And then you're going to have a group of people called Puritans, which are the religious name of people. The Puritans are a religious name. They're also called parliamentarians who support Parliament. Okay, so you have those who support the royalty versus those who support the parliamentary, and you're going to have this divide amongst these people, and they're going to fight in a civil war over it. Now, understand, here's the issue with King Charles I. First of all, his father, King James I, had basically come into power and became an absolute monarch, and never really called upon Parliament to do anything, okay? And that makes a big deal because Parliament had been a major factor, even along with King Henry VIII, in control of what's going on in England, especially when it comes to money. Of course, the big one always is money. And King James never really dealt with them. The only thing positive King James is going to do is he's going to write a new version of the Bible called the King James Version, which most people are familiar with. But ultimately, King James is going to become a thorn in Parliament's side. Of course, when he dies, his son takes over, King Charles I. Same problems. But this time, unlike King James, there's going to be a lot of more turmoil. It's going to lead to war that's going to happen here in the middle of the 17th century. And now understand, while the 30 Years' War is going on down in regular Europe, mainland Europe, this civil war is going to happen up on the English Isles. Okay? So here's what they're fighting over. They're obviously fighting over control of England. All right, so you have King James, like I mentioned, his son Charles. It did not work well with Parliament. They would never call Parliament. They would never ask them to do anything, and Parliament wanted control back because that's what they believed in. Okay, so the Puritans, those who supported Parliament, are going to fight with the Cavaliers, those who supported the king. And what they will do is the Puritans are going to hire a Puritan leader named Oliver Cromwell. Go ahead and put an underline next to his name or highlight him. And understand his new model army. What he's going to do is he's going to bring a new type of fighting into the English Civil War that's going to basically baffle the Cavaliers and the royal soldiers that are there. Okay, one part is the idea of the long rifle, which will become very influential in the American Revolution. But the long rifle is going to be used here, and it's going to be a killing machine for this new model army. And how the new model army is going to work is this. They're going to be full-time paid professional soldiers, okay? They're mercenaries, but they're full-time paid, and they're going to be English, and they're going to fight for Parliament and fight for their freedoms. You have a whole group of people that are supporting Parliament that are on the lower ends of society that now have a chance to be paid and a chance to fight for their freedom. They're going to do this. And they're also going to be like the Marines. They're going to be able to fight anywhere. They're very multi-talented. Army Rangers, Navy SEALs. That's what we're looking at with this new model army, and what Cromwell is going to do is he's going to decimate the Cavaliers and essentially overrun them during this time period of the Civil War. Now, what's really most important about this is not necessarily that the Puritans win and how Parliament takes over. It's more about what happens to King Charles I, okay? So what's going to happen is King Charles I is going to be captured. He's going to be put in prison, and then he's going to be put on trial, which really never happens with the king, and he's going to be sentenced to death, okay? And it's going to be the first time in the history of Europe that a king or a monarch, one who had absolute control, had this divine right, is going to be executed. And they're going to publicly execute him. They're going to behead him, all right, and call him a traitor to England. And as he is gone, you know, obviously he is dead. There's going to supposed to be another king, but because of the English Civil War and what happens in 1649, it doesn't go to a king. Actually, his son, Charles II, is going to be put into exile. Excuse me, during this time, and Oliver Cromwell is going to take over, and that's going to change the whole view, and it really is going to affect what had happened with the war itself. That it isn't going to go in the direction necessarily the Parliament wanted. Okay, so when Cromwell comes in, he's not royalty. He had fought on behalf of the Parliament, but he's not going to do any of that. He's going to become like a military dictator. And again, that's not what England wanted. That's not what Parliament wanted. They wanted to have kind of working control with the monarchy, where their rights and the rights of the people and taxes were in control, and this idea of democracy was going to be there, and Cromwell didn't even do that. So when he dies, Parliament looks at itself and says, you know what, we need to bring the monarchy back, but with restrictions. So what they do is they bring back Charles II, and this is actually called the Restoration. Okay? Excuse me. When the monarchy returns, all right, King Charles II is going to come in. Now, he's called the Merry Monarch, as a happy monarch, M-E-R-R-Y. But this restoration is restoring the throne to the rightful part of the Stuart dynasty. But what King Charles II is going to do much, much different than his father in this case is he's going to create reform. He's going to work with Parliament. He's going to do the things he's supposed to do to keep England happy. Okay, he even incorporates what is known as habeas corpus, this idea that King Henry II had promoted back in the Middle Ages of giving prisoners rights. Rights to jury, going back to people's rights, becomes a major part of this parliamentary democracy that you're going to see, this parliamentary system that we even use today in the United States to a degree. Okay, it's working with this two branches of government. In the case of England, it's three branches of government, where you have a king, you have the parliament, and you have judicial system, very similar to what we see today in our modern U.S. So King Charles II in this restoration is going to bring people back, but unfortunately, as you know, when monarchs, they get old, they die, and his son will take over, and that's going to bring other problems, okay? So the next monarch to come in is going to be his son, King James II. Now, here's the issue with King James. He's Catholic, and you have a Protestant country. So you've got a big problem here where you don't have a trust factor. You lack of trust between the English people and their king, okay? So it made the English people very nervous that he was Catholic, and he was very pro-Catholic in a lot of the what he does for the religious clergy, even though he's allowing the Church of England to do what they're supposed to do, but he's not Anglican. That's a big, big problem. And understand, even through all this turmoil, England is a very, very tolerant, religiously tolerant country, even to this day, but you still have these conflicts between Catholics and Protestants. It became a big, big issue. Okay? So, anyway, here's what it comes down to, and this is where it's amazing when you think about family versus power. Power always takes over, okay? So James's daughter from his first marriage, Mary, who is a Protestant, is going to go off and marry William of Orange, and William of Orange is a prince in the Netherlands, which is a Protestant country that had just gotten its freedom from Spain after the 30 Years' War. And they're going to get their army together, and they're going to essentially attack England, okay? And they're going to march on England, especially they're going to march on London. And they're going to try to overthrow King James. Now, King James being smart, he leaves in exile before anything happens, gets out of London, gets down into France, and will live a very luxurious lifestyle down in France. But ultimately, Mary and William are going to kind of retake the throne of England in what is known as the Glorious Revolution. Go ahead, underline Glorious Revolution. And why it's called the Glorious Revolution is because it's bloodless. Nobody's going to die. James is going to leave. William and Mary are going to take over. The armies are going to unite Protestant countries of England and the Netherlands. The armies are strong, and there's nobody going to die. That's a huge thing here. All right? But even more important than that is you still have a monarch in control. It's willing to work with Parliament, and what they do next is revolutionary. This is the big part of moving forward when we get into this next period of enlightenment and this movement into people's rights. What William and Mary do is so critical. Okay. Now, we even honor William and Mary today. They have a college, the oldest college, one of the oldest colleges in Virginia is named after William and Mary, of course, from the settlement from Jamestown. It's in that Williamsburg area. But what they do is so powerful. And what they're going to do is they're going to reform government. Okay. They're going to reform government in the idea of splitting powers between the monarch and the parliament. But what they're also going to do is they're going to give people rights. All right, so here are William and Mary, and if you want to wonder why they look kind of the same, it's because they are cousins, not uncommon as we're learning, okay, but they are in charge of the throne. But here's what's going to be so important. You need to highlight this, underline this, whatever you need to do to remember this is so critical. They're going to institute what is called a constitutional monarchy. Okay, this part being the big word, and it's the beginning of what is called constitutionalism, which is down here that you need to underline. but basically the king and parliament are going to work together to rule, okay? And they're going to institute in 1689 what is called the Bill of Rights. If you think about it, folks, we have a Bill of Rights today in our country that is based on this English Bill of Rights of 1689, and it is so unbelievably critical how important this is, because when the English people get rights, that's going to turn over when the American Revolution happens, that they're going to fight for those similar rights. You're going to see this happen in France. This idea of freedom and democracy, modern democracy, not Greek democracy, but modern democracy, is really going to take off. And this whole constitutionalism, this constitution idea is mind-blowing at the time, and it's really going to help the people move forward, and it will become the basis for our U.S. government. Okay, so when we get into Enlightenment, we talk about John Locke and the Baron de Montesquieu and Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Voltaire and all these people that fought for rights in France and rights in England. It's going to carry over to what happens into America, and we're going to move this modern democracy forward into the new kind of modern age of what's going to happen around the world.